Alright, now let's talk about food and drink. It's now early summer. Our first migrant wave is getting ready to arrive. And we've got somewhere between 50 and 60 drink. And you might be wondering how long that will really last. And the answer is, take the number of dwarves you have, multiply it by 4. That's how many drinks you'll go through this season. I think it's season. Don't quote me. It's a ballpark. It's not perfect, but it'll give you an idea. We have 7 dwarves. That's 28 drinks this season. So we'll go through roughly half of our drink just with the dwarves we have, excluding any migrants that might arrive. Fish, meat, and plants for food, you'll consume about half that rate. So we'll get about twice your number of dwarves, or in this case, about 14. So we've got enough fish to last us for this season, but we're going to be getting a little low on drink, especially if the migrants come early, and then they consume, another half again as many drinks as we were talking about here. And so you end up with a situation where we're probably going to need to start thinking about food and drink soon. Now, we moved all those seeds down here for a reason, and the reason is plant them. That'll give our weaponsmith something to do when he's not dealing with finishing off our massive trap component order that we haven't finished yet. Meanwhile, you'll notice people are starting to bring the food underground. Notice that dwarves love to leave 1 or 2 tiles of undug stuff while they start working on the next floor. You'll notice some frame rate drops once I start to get 50 migrants or so. At about 100, it'll start to get substantial but not problematic. 200 plus animals, we're going to see our frame rate drop pretty good. It's not going to be terrible. I'm pretty religious about buttoning up my animals. They're not roaming around free. My pathfinding is fairly restricted in terms of, I'm not going to need dwarves roaming the entire fortress. They're going to have fairly confined areas that they're working in. Our fortress is fairly small in terms of space across from one point to another. It will slow down some, but we shouldn't have any problems with FPS death. Alright, our first migrant wave has arrived, and since I've now been at this for 4 hours, I'm going to take a momentary break, grab a soda, use the facilities, and come back so we can discuss what we're going to do with these guys. So hold on, and I'll be back in 5 minutes or so. Alright, I'm back. Okay. Migrants. Some folks have been talking about, how slow would the game, or how much would I have to have going on for the game to get unplayably slow. There's two things going on there. First off, there's unplayably slow, and then there's unstreamably slow. And unstreamably slow basically doesn't happen. Because Dwarf Fortress is only using a single core, whatever other cores on my i7 are available have no problem going ahead and continuing to stream content from the game that's not moving. However, Dwarf Fortress, which only runs on a single core, has a finite limited capacity in terms of what it can do, and the fact that I'm running an i7 doesn't help me improve over necessarily a single core processor, because it's the speed of the single core that matters. Now, migrants. The first thing I do when I get a wave of migrants, besides pause the game, which I have it do automatically, is come into Dwarf Therapist and set the sorting by migration wave, and then read dwarves to get the new dwarves in. In this case, we've got 4 dwarves who've arrived. Notice the difference. These guys arrived in the spring or the winter of the previous year, and these guys arrived in the summer. In my case, I like to set them all to a task I call Hauler Peasant. The peasant job, and I do this for everybody when they first come in. All of them get assigned to the peasant class. You only get out of the peasant job by having something useful that I want you to do. If you're not useful otherwise, you stay a peasant forever. Peasants do all the tasks I don't really care about. They're architects, they haul, they do the siege operations and pump manning and things like that that I don't care about. They run the smelters, they burn the wood, they butcher animals, they brew, they mill, they make lye. These are tasks that I don't care so long as they get done, because they don't necessarily benefit aside from speed, and I don't care about speed because I'll have 4 workshops all doing them at once, and so the fact that a guy is really slow to produce lye doesn't matter when I have 4 guys all cranking lye out at once. Actually, that's only true if Dwarf Fortress is incapable of taking advantage of the large address-aware setting. I don't know if Toady has thought about memory addressing on 64-bit architectures. Well, at some point, and not this version, and probably not the next version, and probably not the version after that, but sometime in 2017, Toady's eventually going to have to go back and say, you know what, it's time to start talking about multi-core, because it's not going away. Multi-threaded is the way of the future. Single-threaded applications, unless they're small, are just going to continue to fall more and more by the wayside. Now let's talk about these 4 migrants here that came in. This guy has no mutable skills. This guy has no mutable skills. This guy is a clothier as his mutable skill. This guy is a tanner as his mutable skill. But, in addition, they also came with a few military skills amongst them. This guy would make a decent hunter. These guys can use maces. This guy can use an axe. They all have some sort of shield or armor skill. They're reasonable dodgers for newbies. These guys probably would make a decent military to start. Now, we don't really have the facilities to start equipping a military yet, so we're probably not going to. We'll leave them as woodcutters, animal trainers. They'll do my doctoring jobs if anybody gets injured. I'll have them do tanning and butchery. Now, this guy does have a mutable skill, so we're going to convert him to a special profession called bone worker. And this guy has cloth making as a mutable skill, and I'm also going to convert him to bone working. Now, you might ask, what the hell is a bone worker? And it's not what you're probably thinking in my fortress. Bone workers do tanning, butchery, a few animal-related skills. They clean fish, they keep my bees, if I have any. They make leather, they carve bones, and they deal with all the cloth working in my fortress. Basically, and when they're not doing that, they're hauling. So basically, they're limited sets of what the haulers themselves do. You'll notice a lot of skills in common here between these various animal skills, for example, but they don't do all these other skills here, and I don't have them dealing with, farming, for example. This subset is a bunch of skills that I really don't care about, but I need to have some people doing them. Dwarves, for example, will actually go berserk if you don't get them clothed in a reasonable time frame. So, bone carving, the problem with bone carving and wood crafting, I should turn wood crafting on too while I'm thinking about it, is that if they mood in those skills, they're not real useful, A, and B, one of the things you love to make with bone carvers and wood carvers is bolts. Bolts that are masterwork, that get fired, get destroyed. When somebody's masterworks get destroyed, they get unhappy. So really highly skilled bone carvers and really highly skilled wood crafters who make bolts and often make masterworks end up with a situation where they end up going berserk because some guy is actually defending the fortress using their masterwork bolts. Not kidding. The way to avoid that is twofold. First off, get them to mood in something else. In this case, I've got one guy who will mood in cloth making and another guy who will mood in tanning. And theoretically, once they've done that, that's their highest skill. I can have them make masterworks of those kind, whatever that might be, and they don't care so much that they lost a bolt that's a masterwork or 10 bolts that's a masterwork because they've produced hundreds of masterworks is the goal. Yeah, it sucks, but it doesn't suck that bad. That's one of those nice little bugs I'm hoping Toady fixes somewhere along the way, but probably won't happen until 2020 when the next version of Dwarf Fortress actually comes out. I should say the next major revision comes out. Alright, with our guys assigned to various tasks in the fortress to keep things on running, as it were, it's time to take these guys who aren't specialized and put them into their final specialized professions. This guy here is going to be a grower, support farmer, and this guy's going to be a carpenter. You'll notice that all of my guys have these little two-part names. Crafters have mutable skills. Haulers do the hauling. You'll see military guys here in a minute when I start forming a military. I sometimes turn on laborers, like for this guy, that aren't part of their job. I don't have any skilled weaponsmiths. So this guy is my only skilled weaponsmith. If something needs to be made in the weapon sense, I want him doing it. Otherwise, these guys are pretty much right where I want them to be, for now. Now notice, I've done this, and the dwarves aren't even on the screen yet. The game loads the dwarves into memory before they actually walk onto the map, and so when they come in, they're already assigned to whatever I set them to be in Dwarf Therapist. Don't have to wait for them to arrive, like you would if you were doing this purely in the game. Oh look, animal people! Notice they go around the water, which is the goal. That acts like a wall if they are not aquatic. Now, once we've got the ball inside the walls here, ooh, I've got an idea. Those guys that didn't have mutable skills. Yeah, them. They're going to do masonry, because I could use a couple extra masons at this point, and they can do the job. I'm turning off the Mason's Workshop job at this point because I no longer want this producing anything. Our serrated disc manufacture is still proceeding. Our carpenter is still making beds and bins. Let's look at the contents of our wagon and figure out what we haven't brought down yet. We've got some food items that are in the process of being brought down because we just created the stockpile. We didn't have anybody to actually move the stuff until just now when we started getting some haulers in. We've got some thread, a whole lot of sandbags, some more food, and a couple of pieces of stone that we really don't care about too much. This point, we've got the haulers are here, and as soon as they switch out of migrant mode, they're going to start hauling food down to the stockpile where we want it, and then we'll be in a good shape to really start expanding the fortress downward and giving these guys tasks to do that don't involve standing around with their thumbs in the posterior. Yes, one of my viewers notes that the more valuable your fortress is, the more migrants you get per wave. So, and it's hard to make that first wave really large. Yeah, 4 or 5 migrants is pretty good. Um, but the second or third wave, we're going to get absolutely swamped with migrants. They're just going to crawl out of the woodwork to come join our fortress. And we'll need to be ready to deal with that. One of the ways we'll be ready to deal with that is we're going to make sure we have a surplus of food and booze on hand before they arrive, so we don't have to worry about running out of supplies. And we're going to do that by dealing with something we've put off until now. We're going to have to start butchering those draft animals that we don't care about, because they're just basically pasture-munching fiends that we don't want to keep around. And we're going to have to convert all of that milk that we got earlier into cheese, so that we free up the empty barrels for now. Keep in mind, we don't have anybody making rock pots yet. We don't have anybody making barrels yet. I don't make wooden barrels other than the ones I bring with us. So we don't have much in the way of food storage items. And we need to deal with that. And the way we deal with that is by setting up the appropriate animal handling facilities. In this case, butchers' workshops, tanning workshops for the skins, farmers' workshops to deal with the milk, cheese, wool, and thread making from wool that we're going to need in this pasture space. And I will typically build a couple of butcher shops here, and then a couple of tanning shops next to them, and a couple of farmers' workshops around that to deal with the non-lethal production, not leatherworking, I want tanning. Now, these farmers' workshops are dual purpose. They also convert plants into various products. Plants are stored in that center stockpile there, and they're stored on the food stockpile here down below, so they're right in the middle of all the plants they're going to need. Additionally, animal stuff is produced on this floor where the farmers' workshops are and the butchers' workshops are, and any necessary products are only going one floor out of their way down to this level below it where they'll be stored. This is a reasonably efficient vertical setup. Everything's within, 10 squares tops of itself right off the bat. Now, we do need to have a stockpile from which these products can be picked up. And so what I'll do is I'll set up a stockpile around the outside of all of these. And this stockpile is going to take only meat, cheese, fat, it's not going to hold milk. I could let it hold milk, but I don't want to, because if I'm milking my animals, I'm doing two jobs in tandem. I'm going to have them milked, and then I'm immediately going to convert the milk into cheese. So there's never going to be a need to store milk. I'm not going to do that. You could, and I probably will, enable a few other things as well. Quarry bush leaves will be stockpiled here briefly before they're moved off to the final stockpile. Let's see, flour and dwarven syrup, milled plants. There it is. Flour and sugar will be on this list. Oh no, I don't need the milled plants. I'm sorry. Don't need those. Darn it! All right. I don't need the milled plants because this isn't the milling area. That comes later. This area will not hold, can hold barrels. It wouldn't matter. So I can, do that. Give it some barrels. It's going to give to that stockpile down below where the actual food storage takes place. This stockpile serves two purposes. One that is for interim storage for like things produced by the butcher's workshops will temporarily be moved here, and once they're in a stockpile I don't have to worry about them rotting. And additionally, this will serve as overflow if this stockpile down below fills up. We haven't yet dealt with, and I plan to get started on and need to, fishing. We haven't talked about fishing much. Fishing is a minor food source. I like to have fishing if I can in a given map. In this case, we're going to dig a fishing area over here. We're actually going to build a... That'll work. We're actually going to build a small fishing shack, basically, here in this area that extends out over the river and is graded off and is safe to fish from and does not endanger our fishermen. And then downstairs here, we're going to set up an array of fish processing workshops. All right, let's talk about, some folks have mentioned it on the thread here, passability. When I build a workshop, let's say I build a leatherworks, you'll notice that two of those X's that form that blueprint, if you will, come in two colors, a light green and a dark green. What that represents is once the workshop is built, the dark green X's are impassable. They are basically stone blocks that can't be moved through. Some of these buildings, if you put them in a 3x3 room and the door is on a particular side or corner, effectively become impassable, so the guy will walk into the room, build the workshop, and then not be able to get out and starve to death. Now you'll notice none of my floors actually have workshops built into 3x3 rooms. Part of that reason is avoiding that problem, and the other reason is, well, it's just not real convenient in the middle of my giant circular rooms. So keep in mind when you build your workshops of how your passability is laid out, how your access is laid out to each of these areas, so that you have an idea of whether your dwarves will be able to get in and out. And our first butcher's workshop is up. And there go the farmers' workshops that we'll need to make cheese. And our dwarves will come along, convert the milk into cheese, free up our barrels, and get us ready to start producing booze. Remember, our farmer's been up here planting. The kitchen area, we need to talk about this in a little more detail here. Right now I have 40-ish units of dwarven rum. I have 7 rock nuts. I have 10 plump helmet spawn, 10 pigtail seeds, 10 sweet pod seeds. Our farmer, theoretically, is going to start planting his little rear end off, and we'll get some plants in and harvested. I've set it so that only farmers will be able to harvest, so that our farmer continues to gain skill. If you don't set that, let's talk about that option. In the orders menu, there's a option for farmers harvest, only farmers harvest, or all dwarves harvest. Normally, you're going to want this on only farmers. The exception would be your fortress gets invaded, a forgotten beast roams around your halls and kills a bunch of people, and you have no idea whether anybody will actually do the harvesting or not. You don't go into Dwarf Fortress, you don't set anybody else up as a farmer. You simply flip that switch, and all the dwarves will harvest any food that's available, and you don't have to worry about who's doing it. Now, the downside to that is, if all of your dwarves are harvesting a finite number of plants, they all spread the skill gains out amongst themselves, and nobody really gets really good at it. So you end up with mediocre farm production at best. What you then get into is that everybody's a dabbling farmer and nobody's really good at it, and you can't produce as many crops as you would like. Setting it to only farmers harvest will have your farmers, i.e. your growers, specialize in being the only ones who actually pick the plants and produce the crops for your fortress. This will lead to greater overall yields and allow you to produce more food for your dwarves. You haven't missed much. I set up a stockpile on the second floor to deal specifically with our animal products, butchering, tanning, farmers' workshops, eggs, meat, fat, etc. that feeds into this food stockpile down below. So our butcher products are basically moving 2 steps and being dropped in a stockpile so they don't rot. Now is a good time to talk about garbage. One of the big questions I get all the time in the forum or in forums and subreddits is, what do I do with this purple stuff that keeps happening every time I butcher an animal? Well, the purple stuff is called miasma, and it represents stink. When things rot, they smell bad. Dwarves don't like miasma. It makes them unhappy. And dealing with miasma is not particularly tricky, but does require you to understand how miasma works. There's a few ways to deal with miasma. The first and most straightforward is simply dump all the stuff that's going to rot that you don't care about on the top. Drop it right on the surface and leave it there. Stuff on the surface continues to rot, but does not produce miasma. Okay. Slightly exploity, but also effective, is to tunnel from the surface down to an area and then floor over the surface tunnel that you just made. And what you'll do then is you'll create an area that's technically treated like it's above ground, even though it's really not. It'll be indoors but above ground, and stuff will rot but not produce miasma because it's treated like it's above ground. That works. A little exploity, but it works. Third, you can dig a long hallway, drop a bunch of doors in that hallway, and basically wall off the miasma so that only people who get exposed to it are the guys who are actually dumping off the garbage. That works, but it's not really the most effective. You still end up with people being exposed to it. They get unhappy when they're exposed to it. You're not fixing the problem, you're just minimizing it. The easiest way I've found that's safe and does not require any access to the surface is to dig a small diagonal hole. You'll notice I've dug here, and I'm digging 1 square diagonally, and then make this square a channel so it drops down to the floor below. When I make this into a garbage zone, once this guy finishes his digging, what will happen when a dwarf goes to throw something away is he'll stand in this square here and pitch it into the hole. And the miasma does not spread diagonally, so it'll fill up this place down here will be stinking to high heaven. This square directly above it will stink to high heaven. The square where the dwarf stands won't stink at all because it doesn't go through the diagonal. And so you've created a situation where your dwarves can walk right up next to the garbage chute, drop something in, and walk away, never having been exposed to the stink, and the stink never gets out, and the stuff rots safely without having any surface access. Now at this point, I've got a lot of cheese laying around, and cheese has a tendency to rot really quickly. So we're going to make sure that everybody knows that they can haul food temporarily. And give those 3 idle people something to do. Alright, we've now converted all of the milk we had into cheese and freed up a bunch of barrels in the process. I don't think we actually have any plants. Oh, someone was asking, well, how do you tell them to throw it down a hole? That's a good question. It turns out that garbage zones work, have an unusual trait that's advertised nowhere. I have no idea how somebody even figured this out. But basically, if a dwarf is standing in a garbage zone getting ready to throw away his refuse, and there's a hole next to him, he will pitch it down the hole. So even if there were two spots to pitch it into, and one of them was flat ground and the other is a hole, he'll stand on the flat ground and pitch it in the hole. Basically, once this stuff is in the hole, I don't have to worry about it anymore. It's out of sight, out of mind. It can rot. I don't care. You don't have to tell them to do it. You do need to make sure that the garbage zone is adjacent to a hole. Personally, I like to make sure that it covers both the hole and the space they stand in, and that there's only two squares actually accessible, the spot they stand and the spot they throw. Your mileage may vary. Make it too large and they can actually start dropping the stuff outside the hole, which you don't want, obviously. There, we got all that cheese migrated downstairs. You'll notice we now have about 10 units of other, which is where the cheese shows up. Our farmer is being particularly lazy. We are not amused. Yeah, this is basically an oubliette. Ah, see, that's the advantage of this, is that this doesn't connect to anywhere. You'll notice that once the garbage goes down, it sits in a hole. It doesn't connect to anything else. Dwarves won't path into it unless you tell them to pick something up from the bottom. They won't go down there. So you end up with a situation where they don't have to worry about, falling garbage landing on their heads. If you make that accessible, and I might later on in order to retrieve bones or whatever, then you do have to worry that nobody's throwing anything away at the exact moment that somebody's standing down below it, because you can end up with a situation where a dwarf goes and pitches something heavy into the garbage pit, and the guy underneath him dies because it hit him in the head and killed his brain. Don't laugh, it's happened. I once lost a miner who dug up to the surface, created a boulder, and it was raining, and the rain pushed the boulder down a hill into the miner, who died. Boulder rolling downhill, very dangerous. Alright, our miners are getting unoccupied again, and our masons kind of need something to do, so let's get something built here on the surface. We were talking about fishing earlier. Now's a good time. Oh, we don't have any blocks. That's something we're going to have to fix. Give me just a sec. I want to make sure sound sense is set up. Alright. Now we should start getting sound. That's just what XML files are defaulted to. I've never changed it. I don't open XML files locally very often. You'll notice it's not Internet Explorer pinned to my desktop, pinned to my bar here. There we go. How's that? Too loud? Alright, let's see who's idle here. I think our bone workers need something to do. They've already migrated all the food off. They've already converted the skin into leather from that first yak, so let's go ahead and get the next one butchered. You have to be cautious when you're butchering your animals that you don't butcher them too quickly. You can easily overwhelm your available food haulers, you can easily overwhelm your available tanners, and you'll end up with skins and meat rotting uselessly. That's not a good idea, don't do it. You can avoid that by carefully dealing with how fast you butcher your animals. But our mine workers, on the other hand, need something to do, and they're not going to be butchering animals. So let's talk about wells. Everybody loves water, except dwarves. Well, unless they're injured. And then they love water because it's the only thing they'll drink. So, the trick is, how do we get water downstairs safely? And the answer is, well, you dig a well system. Now, bear with me. I'm going to do a lot of designating here in silence, and then I'll go back and explain what I'm doing and why. Alright, let's talk about our well complex. This is a significant issue. First off, we need to talk about pressure. Water is always pressurized to one level below where it is, and it will spread out on the same level where it is. So you'll notice our water here, from this stream that we can see up on the surface, is actually at level -1. It will spread out until it is back at level -1. So if I channeled into the side of this, everything from this level all the way down would flood, like you might expect. But there's another side to this, and that's pressure. If I connected this staircase to the river, The water will flow into the staircase, flow down the stairs all the way to the bottom, flood over here and come back up and flood out of our wells, and then flood all the way back up to our fortress and drown every dwarf in sight. And the way you prevent that is by use of what's called a pressure regulator. I know, don't ask me. I didn't invent it, and once I figured it out, I wouldn't make a fortress without it. This little diagonal right here, where the water goes down one floor and comes back up and moves diagonally through this area, only diagonally, not connected vertically or horizontally, only diagonally. This resets the pressure to this level, -6. The water won't rise above this level as long as the pressure regulator is between the water source and its destination. Water is infinite, and as long as there's a place for it to go and it doesn't have any spot to, it doesn't have anything keeping it back, it will keep flooding in here indefinitely. Now, what will happen in our case, since we have a pressure regulator in place, is that water will flood in through the stairs above, down through the pipe, into this staircase here, drop down one level, go over a couple of squares, come back up, still pressurized at this point, and then depressurize as it moves diagonally into this area. Okay? And once it's in this area, it's now depressurized only to floor -6, and so when it arrives in this area below our wells, it does not flood upstairs and drown all our dwarves. Water is infinite in two cases. One, it's an aquifer. All aquifers are automatically infinite water. Two, any water attached to the side of a map is automatically infinite. That includes water in caverns in the form of lakes. That includes streams and brooks. That includes oceans. That includes lakes. Infinite water will continue to flood into any area it is pressurized to the level of. The water I'm tapping to is a stream, and so it's infinite. It will continue to flood in indefinitely. I never have to worry about it running out. And we're going to have to deal with the other problem you deal with in water, and that is critters want to get in, and you need to think about how you keep them out. Basically, you keep your critters out with the creative use of grates and such. And what will happen is once this is all dug out, we'll actually build a grate here. In fact, I need to change this briefly just a moment. I just realized I've done some of this a little wrong. There we go. Sorry. We'll build a grate here, and no critter underneath it can destroy it because it's on a different Z level. Basically, a critter comes in below it here, he's got nowhere to go, he can't touch the grate because it's on a different Z level. It might as well be in Timbuktu. That grate's effectively impervious, so we don't have to worry about aquatic critters swimming up our pipes and getting out in the well right in the middle of our hospital. Now, some folks are asking, why are you designating all this with stairs? Why aren't you just digging it out? And the answer is trees. What you can run into, see this pipe here is 1 wide. What you can run into with a standard hallway designation that's flat-bottomed is that you'll get a sapling that springs up right, say, here. And what'll happen is the sapling will stay a sapling indefinitely, unless the water in that area drops below a certain point, and then, hey presto, bang, it's a tree. And once it becomes a tree, it blocks the water flow. It treats it just like a wall. So you end up with a situation where a tree grows in the middle of your aqueduct, and your water shuts off. And now you've got a problem, because if you send somebody in to cut the tree down, the water on the other side comes flooding in and drowns him, and you lose a dwarf and his axe. You don't want that either. So the reason I use stairs is because trees don't grow on stairs, and stairs don't affect water flow. And this aqueduct is tree-free. Now, I'm not designating a very large cistern on the inside because this infinite water supply will never run out and is enemy free. So, what we've got here is an infinite source of water, always fresh, never have to worry about enemies getting in. It's absolutely perfect for our purposes. Now we do need to discuss one other thing that relates to wells. If your water is only 1 Z level deep, you'll get mud. And when the bucket from your well drops down into the mud-laced water and comes back up, it'll come up laced with mud. Mud in your water, which you are then using to treat dwarven injuries, leads to infections, leads to dead dwarves. So, your wells need to be at least 2 squares deep, one for the water and a second one for the mud-laced water. Additionally, you don't want trees to grow underneath your well, so no flat bottoms in your well either, because what you'll end up with is the tree grows on the bottommost level, and you end up with a tree with mud on top of it, and your water is again mud-laced, and then you have to deal with it. So, generally speaking, I will have a well above a spot where the water is drawn from, above a spot where the mud resides, above the spot where theoretically a tree would grow, and I'll dig my wells at least 3 deep. You don't have to, 2 is enough, as long as you don't ever get a tree. But with 3 deep, even if I got a tree, nothing bad would happen. The central staircase that leads down into my well complex serves 2 purposes. First, it provides access for my dwarf to get in and out when they're digging the aqueduct. Second, if a dwarf falls into a well for whatever reason, he can walk up the stairs and get out. If he falls into a well and there's no stairs and he can't swim, he just drowns. And now you have a well with a dead body at the bottom of it. And again, I'm not building in any way to shut the water off, so I need to make sure that I don't have problems with dwarves falling in and drowning. Now, in my case, I don't need to worry about making his 3 levels, although I do out of habit, because it's going to be a bottom. The bottom will actually be a ramp, and trees don't grow on ramps any more than they grow on stairs. So technically, I could only go 2 levels down and be fine, because the water will be drawn from the first level, and the ramp at the bottom will have mud on it. But we won't touch it. Now, this will take our miners a minute to dig this out. Initially, we're just going to start with holes. Wells will come later once I start getting metal buckets and metal chains and platinum blocks and nice things that I build in the well. See, everybody laughs about Urist whatever falls in the well, but, you know, I hear all the time about things come out of my well and they ate my dwarves in the middle of the dining room, and oh my god, my dwarf fell into the well and drowned. Got a plan for these things. Way back at the beginning of the fortress, I built a grate out of one of those gabbro stones I brought with us. We're going to build that. But I don't want it built while my guy's still digging, so I got to suspend that so it's not going to get built. Otherwise, they'll come in, they'll grate it off, and I'll have a guy down there starving where there's no food. And I definitely don't want anybody in the aqueduct when I connect it up to the water, because then we got a problem. Alright, so here's our cloth making and leather making area. We'll store those together. We're never going to have so much of any of them that it really fills up this stockpile. We'll constantly be consuming cloth to make clothing. We'll constantly be consuming cloth and leather to make bags. We'll constantly be consuming leather to make cloaks for our military. This stockpile will never fill up. It will build up. It will draw down. It will never, ever, ever get completely full. We will have no problem consuming the cloth faster than we can make it. 4 looms will be used to make thread into cloth. 2 cloth workshops will take all of the output from those looms and produce it into clothing for our dwarves. In case of those of you who are new to Dwarf Fortress or who have played in older versions, clothing is now essential. Your dwarves can no longer be allowed to remain naked. They will snap, they will go berserk, they will pick up a weapon, and they will start bludgeoning people. Don't do it. So, how do you avoid it? Well, dwarves only need 3 items of clothing. Something to cover their feet, something to cover their legs, something to cover their bodies. That's it. So, typically, I will build a robe, which covers my dwarf's body, trousers, which covers my dwarf's legs, and shoes, which cover my dwarf's feet. Those 3 items will produce en masse from whatever cloth we have laying around except silk, and we will produce them as many as we need for as many dwarves as we have. Our dwarves will always be dressed in whatever high-quality clothing we can produce, probably from pigtails or rope reeds. The leather that we produce from our tanning upstairs will get drawn down here and be consumed for making leather cloaks, which we will use solely for our military. Cloaks cover all parts of the body and therefore provide armor to all areas of the body. Arms, legs, necks, heads, you name it. That's great because most armor items don't cover things like the neck. Toady hasn't coded in any gorgets for the neck. So when we train our dwarves or they go into combat, a lucky shot to the neck with no cloak, has no armor, leads to a decapitated dwarf. On the other hand, leather's not really good as armor, but it's better than nothing. So we have a possibility that we stop a lethal blow based on our use of cloaks. Ferret paint, what's your real question there about what type of embark is this? Mail is implemented, but it doesn't cover the neck area. Plate is implemented, doesn't cover the neck area. Yeah, this isn't Flat Volcano. This is an area adjacent to some rocky wastelands that's highly savage. This is the giant monkey embark. Alright. Our bone carvers are putting together the craftsman's workshops, and we can go ahead and get them working on something useful. Alright, we have finally run out of coal on the surface. Holy cow, that took a while, didn't it? Meanwhile, we have a handful of bronze bars left over, and a metric ton of large serrated bronze discs. including at least one that's masterwork. There's a handful in there that are masterwork along the way. That's sweet. All right. Let's go ahead. We had our mechanics build some mechanisms earlier. All right, and our mine workers now have lots of things to dig out and traps to build. All right, we're going to go ahead and briefly connect ourselves to the caverns. As you can see, they open up below us here. We're going to cross our fingers really hard and hope that Urist McStupid, when he mines out that last staircase to seal it back up, doesn't fall all the way down into the water and drown himself. But if he does, well, Darwin, right? And here comes our first intelligence test of the night. And he failed. Urist McIdiot has drowned. Hey, I got an idea, guys. We're going to dig out a staircase. Let's stand on it when we do it. You know, I know we could stand next to it. I know we're capable of doing that, but we're going to tunnel out this staircase, you know, right over a 3-story drop into a lake underwater. Let's stand on it when we carve it out. The answer is sometimes they're smart enough not to, and sometimes they're not. You take what you get. They won't find the corpse. I won't care.
You may have spotted me, but you will not catch me.
And the traps are in place. Anything that actually comes into the area will now have to cross a row of razor-sharp bronze discs.
For shame, I am detected. Doth my dagger shine?
And, get past the dogs.
Betrayed!
Yes, I'll do it, but
Betrayed by the
no, it won't work.
cats!
Note that thieves are trap-avoid and will slide in even if there's traps in the way. Dogs are not optional. You need something that can deal with thieves that can slip in. Now, I'm also particular about leaving corpses laying around. Technically, there's probably no harm in it, but the last thing I want is some necromancer slipping up to the edge of that pond and resurrecting a bunch of kobolds and goblins on the inside of the traps. Sob sob. Miner has been missing. Oh, speaking of which, I guess we probably ought to immortalize his stupid... miner, I mean. Planning mode is not vanilla. It comes in a plug-in for Dwarf Fortress. If you install the Lazy Noob pack, you can get that. We don't need to worry about the trolls unless they show up in the next couple of seasons. We are going to move our stuff underground and effectively get rid of this stockade. Ferret Paint, if you download the current version of the Lazy Noob pack, which was updated by, it's out there on my Reddit thread, it contains the planning mode plugin already installed. You don't have to do anything special.
Autumn is at hand.
Alright, and with autumn comes a couple of other considerations. The first one being the Caravan. Now, there's a couple ways to approach this, and if we weren't sitting in the middle of a savage site, I probably wouldn't have had the traps up and we could let the wagons in. Unfortunately, the wagons aren't really going to work for us here because I want those traps up in case of giant monkeys. So we're going to forego the wagons, and we'll just take on the merchants who have the gear on pack animals. We'll have a smaller quantity of goods delivered. They may not necessarily be goods we care about, but we don't have to open ourselves up yet. A better designed, more permanent entrance we'll dig out a little later. This is just a temporary stockade. We're not intending to be here full time. We will replace this with a proper entrance later. Notice that with the staircase in place, there's now no way into the caverns. Sob, poor miner. But yet we're still getting on the soil levels cave moss growth. You can see it starting here on both the soil levels. That's good. We want that. Our drink is now much lower than I would like. And everybody is pretty much busy, so hopefully we'll get somebody here momentarily who'll have a break and actually go and produce some booze for us. We do have some plans to do that with, but we're down to our last 9 drinks, which isn't going to last us very long. Unfortunately, we don't have a large supply of plants built up. Our farming was a little slow to get started. Our first crop of plump helmets should be available momentarily, but there may be a brief period where we run out of booze. Oh, no, there's the plump helmets starting to come up now, so we're safe. Now that we've got our food all downstairs, I'm setting the main food stockpile to links only, which means that we need to make sure that it's taking from all of those places that it needs to take from, or food will stop ending up in our desired stockpiles. Gonna run about another 45 minutes, and I'm gonna have to knock off for the evening. This is a long run for me, guys. I can't promise YouTube will have it up anytime soon, mind you. Big videos like this, they take a long time to process, and I'm going to have to do a little splitting on Twitch to get it uploaded. But give it a day or so, and I should have all of this up there. And tomorrow we're going to pick up sometime during the day, and I'll be making another long run at it at that point. Through the weekend, and then off and on through the week. I won't promise to do it every day. Gets a little tiresome. I'm not particularly extroverted, so dealing with 20 or 25 viewers all asking questions and talking to one another is a bit of a bear for me, I'm afraid. But rest assured, over the next week or two, you're going to see the fortress continue to develop. You're going to be able to watch as we go further and further into these things. You're going to have an opportunity to see the dwarves actually getting these things built up. It depends. Tomorrow, during the weekends, I may stream during the day as opposed to just evening Eastern. Alright, and the pump helmet wine is coming in, so we have taken care of our booze problem, and our booze, which was below 10, is now between 10 and 20. Once that grate is in place, we will forbid and hide all the stone in the well, and then we will connect up the water to the exterior. No, the download doesn't have custom professions. I can upload mine. But frankly, I would recommend that you find out what works for you and not try to rely on mine. About the only profession I can recommend solidly to everyone is to have somebody who has all of the hauling labors turned on and call it hauler. You might customize something else for your haulers. For example, if I sort by profession here, you'll notice my haulers also do other things, not generally masonry. This is an exception. But these tasks that I don't care who does these tasks. I don't care how good anybody is at them, because I'm not so much worried about how fast one dwarf in one workshop can get plant processing done. I'll make 4 workshops and I'll have 4 dwarves all processing plants, and they'll just rip through it by virtue of parallelism. But I do recommend that you have one profession that does have all the hauling tasks, and you keep dwarves in that task for efficiency's sake. You don't want your weaponsmith to have to smelt his own ore, fetch his own bars, deliver his products to the stockpile, go back and smelt some more ore, fetch some more bars, deliver his products to the stockpile. All those extra trips add up, and they make your specialist dwarves A, get skill more slowly, and B, less effective, less productive than you need them to be, ideally. You're best suited to have a handful of specialist dwarves, 2 or 3 per task maybe, and a whole horde of hauler dwarves. If you've got a military, if your military's not doing anything else, turn on the hauler labors. Let them haul stone, let them haul wood. They're obviously going to be protected while they do it. If they're not doing something else, you can always, relocation engineers. Basically, this hauler group here will continue to expand, and I might add some people to some of these other groups, but by and large, they're going to be specialized in whatever it is they're doing. As before, the new migrants all get moved to the hauler corps. Exit from the Hauler Core is only permissible if you have a useful skill I care about. Alright, now we only got 3 this wave, but chances are really good that very soon we're going to end up with a giant, massive wave of death. Yeah, I don't have a broker yet, but I'm betting that, that this incredibly large quantity of serrated bronze discs here is going to guarantee us, that's not counting the ones that are in the... Yeah, the first 2 waves are generally less than 10. It's that third wave when value takes over and goes, "Hi! Here's your wave of 50 dwarves." Alright, and we've brewed all the plants that we had, well, most of the plants, we just picked some more, into booze. We've got 100 drinks ready. That'll get us through the next season pretty much, because by the time the new migrants arrive, we'll be ready to brew more booze on top of what we've already got. Now, let's make sure our mine workers are no longer doing anything but mine working. Got a lot of digging tasks. I don't want to wait for the novice miners to show up. Alright, so, remember we just cracked the caverns earlier, right? So let's talk about forging. There's 2 ways to go about forging. With fuel and without fuel. Without fuel requires magma. You'll notice we don't have a volcano on site. There's 2 ways to get magma, and one of them is at a volcano that comes up to the top of the world. And if the magma doesn't come to you, you gotta go to the magma. The other way to get forging done is with fuel. So we can convert wood to charcoal, use the charcoal to power our smelters, use the charcoal to power our forges. You will burn up an incredible amount of wood. Absolutely incredible. Trying to run your workshops off of charcoal. You will burn an entire forest and still need more wood. You can see here, all that stuff we deforested earlier is represented by those, like, 12 logs that are left sitting there. That's it. That's all we've got at the moment. Our carpenter here has gone absolutely bananas. He's got bins, 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 bins. I'd say we probably need a furniture stockpile to get him out of that, but he's already used up all that wood we cut earlier in that giant area that we designated. He's already gone through it all. Your smelting operations, because of the amount of fuel you need, will burn up wood faster than that carpenter did. And you have nothing to show for it when you're done except whatever item you've used the fuel to create. Whenever possible, I strongly, strongly recommend getting magma forges operational. You can do that in a couple of ways. You can bring the magma up with a magma piston or a pump stack, or the simplest way is simply to dig down to the bottom of the world and build your forges there, and that's what we're going to do. This area here will be a guard station, basically. I would note that technically we're not going into the caverns. The caverns are walled up. We're completely separated from them. We'll make another hole into another cavern, and we'll seal it back up, and we'll keep going down around the caverns. We're not actually going to go through them. There's not much in the caverns, to be honest. The deeper caverns can have large, nasty creatures, but it's basically a different version of the surface for all intents and purposes. The problem you can run into is that there can be things down there that you don't want to deal with, like, say, for example, giant cave spiders. If you're not ready to deal with them, that can be problematic. We haven't exposed anything to sunlight yet, in fact, and thank you for reminding me that I haven't done that yet. I want to get that done early. I suspect our next wave of migrants is going to be quite substantial. We will use that to deploy a giant miner squad. We'll basically be able to carve areas out almost instantly. We'll have a bunch of them that are... Second. There we go. Alright, now what we're getting ready to do... Stairs. Oh, you mean in the middle of the stockpile like this one? I don't even think about the stairs in the middle anymore. I know that there's a 3x3 staircase that runs all the way down through that fortress. I don't have to see it to know that it's there. By definition, if you can build a stockpile over it, it's just additional storage space. So I can basically get 9 extra squares of storage that doubles as transportation. I don't even think about it. I know how my fortress is arrayed vertically. It's all directly above itself, so It's vertical all the way down to the bottom, so I don't have to think about it. It bothered me a little at first, you know, this whole, oh, where are my stairs? But after a while, what difference does it make? You know, it's all vertical, and the dwarves don't care. All my ants are just like my other ants. Alright, now, what we're doing here is getting ready to take advantage of a nice little exploit in the middle of Dwarf Fortress. Yeah, you can always remove them. I mean, like, if, for example, if I wanted to build hatch covers over the areas where those stockpiles were and, you know, secure my stairs, I could do that. I could just remove the stockpile, and anything that was on it would get removed, moved to another area. What we're getting ready to do here, you'll notice that we've dug these trenches right above our farms. Well, if you expose an area to sunlight, as we are with these outer farm areas that aren't currently being planted, it is effectively treated as above ground. It's treated as being surface area for all intents and purposes. This includes things like miasma generation. It also includes things like crops. That means we'll be able to plant in those underground crop farm plots, we'll be able to plant surface crops. So we're going to dig out the area above those farms, and it has to be done carefully to avoid cave-ins. You'll notice I have left that middle stripe on all of these. That's very much intentional. Hypothetically, let's assume that there was an area below this floor that was hollow. If I dug out, just, you know, randomly picked an area, or randomly picked a spot and just said, hey, let's channel out, you know, this section of ground like this, the dwarves would come along and they'd start channeling it out. And let's say, hypothetically, that when they got about midway through it, they channeled out that square, and this square, and this square, and that square. That middle one, that's not connected to anything orthogonally, would fall. It would cave in. It would collapse to the level below it. Now, that might be one tile like it shows up here, or it could be, well, yeah, you got to be careful if you're carving out above hollow space. But basically, let's assume for a moment that they carved out a much bigger space, just for the sake of argument. It might be a little hard to make out here, but that chunk in the middle is actually safe. That chunk in the middle is connected right here, orthogonally back to the mainland, so to speak. Now, the problem comes if the dwarf comes along and goes, oh, I'm going to remove that section right there. That chunk is not safe, because it is not orthogonally connected. Diagonals don't count. So that chunk would fall in. Now, there's two things you need to be aware of with cave-ins in particular. First is you don't want them. No, I'm kidding. The first is that cave-ins create massive blasts of dust. The dust is itself incredibly dangerous. It can slam your miners into a wall and break every bone in their body. It can knock them into a hole. It can suck them in like a vacuum. Basically, miners exposed to the explosive force of a cave-in, dust, whether they're crushed by the falling rock or not, can be killed even if they were standing a fair bit of distance away. Don't let your miners be in the vicinity of a cave-in. Second, cave-ins can cause the pancaking effect. You'll notice that I've created a very vertical fortress. Everything is very much above every other floor. All of this is very vertical, right down through the fortress. All of it is vertical. And there's no solid stone layers between this. It's just floor space, floor space, floor space, floor space, right? Well, if I dug this out badly, like that other section over there, and had a cave in right where this stone is, let's say, that stone would cave in, and it would cave in here, and there's nothing, this floor that it lands on is not solid because the space underneath it is hollow, so it will cave in through this space, and 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 down, 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 until it hit here. Because this is the first space below it that has something solid underneath it. And it would hit here and explode in dust. Everything in between that space, everything between that rock all the way down, anything in that space would be pancaked. It would cease to exist. The pancaking effect takes effect whenever an area caves in and the floor it lands on is effectively hollow. There's nothing underneath it. And it will continue to cave in floor by floor by floor by floor until it hits something solid. So, if you build a vertical fortress like this, and you then subsequently go back and start carving chunks out of it, like I'm doing here, you need to be very, very, very careful that you do not cause a cave-in, because it won't simply crush the people on the top floor, it won't simply crush the people on the second floor, it won't simply crush the people on the third floor. It's going to go all the way down through your fortress and leave a giant gaping hole in its wake that you then have to A, fix, and B, probably kill 12 dwarves on the way down. Cave-ins are incredibly dangerous for vertical fortresses like this. That vertical stripe I'm leaving is so that none of this will cave in. You can safely remove one strip at a time along this and get all of them done. This trick allows me to pull out 2 strips at once from 2 spots, effectively 4 of the 5 strips, if you will, above these forms, without having to worry about a cave-in. Now, I don't go back and remove that center stripe, and I do need to remove it and replace it, but I don't remove it immediately because I want to build flooring over this, and once the flooring is built, then the stripe is safe to remove. And so by doing it in 2 phases like this, I don't have to worry about a cave-in. Make sure that when you are removing areas, you are not removing more than 2 wide in any given direction. As long as you're doing it 2 wide, you're probably going to be safe. It's once you start having disconnected sections like this. Floors and walls anchor orthogonally. So the question is, say for example, I build a floor here. This floor orthogonally holds up this floor, this floor, this floor, and this floor. Diagonals don't count. Yeah, any construction acts like glue. Walls, fortifications, floors, doesn't matter. Bridges don't count. Bridges are retractable. They're not counted as permanent. Grates don't count. Grates are not considered constructions. They're buildings. Floor hatches don't count. They are not permanent constructions. Generally speaking, you're going to be, if you're excavating channels like this, be very careful that you are not excavating too much at once. It's perfectly safe if you're digging down through solid areas to do an entire Z level at a time. Now remember, I was talking about, I drew out a little picture here of an area that would cave in. Well, technically it wouldn't because there's nothing below it to cave in on. You're safe. It's just if this is solid and this is hollow, now you have a chance for the floor here to cave in down to the floor below. If I understand that correctly, because that's a complicated construction question there, the question is, does a floor here anchor a wall below it on 1 square adjacent? Is that correct? I don't know. I think it does, because a wall counts as a ceiling as well, a floor on the level above. I think it counts, but I wouldn't want to test it over the top of my vertical fortress. I'd be real leery about testing something involving a potential cave-in. Now, there are advantages to cave-ins. In fact, there are cases where cave-ins can really be useful. You can excavate a large chunk of rock at one time with a cave-in. There are ways to make cave-ins beneficial. You can do cave-ins on your enemies. Properly arranged, constructed flooring holding up a big chunk of rock. Pull a lever, the constructed flooring goes away because it's on some support or such. Bang! You've just dropped a big chunk of rock on that invading dragon or that invading siege. And they're all gonna die, because anything that doesn't get pancaked is gonna get dust blasted into a wall, broken bones all over the place, cats and dogs living together, total mayhem. You can use them to punch through an aquifer. You can use them to use a magma piston. You can actually, if you're careful and you do it right, you can build a magma mist machine gun. No, I'm not kidding. It involves mixing water and magma in a particular pattern above a cave-in site where where you basically are creating a floor in midair with nothing connecting it to anything. The floor caves in, lands in magma, and creates magma mist that blasts things off ledges and sets everything on fire. Cave-ins, very cautious about cave-ins. That's all I gotta say. I've lost a lot of miners to careless digging over the years. Alright. Now, temporarily, I have to tell my masons to stop making blocks so that they'll get on that whole floor making thing I want them to get onto. They'll finish up what they're doing, and they'll immediately start dropping blocks out here to create a floor. Once the flooring is connected to that center stripe, I can safely remove it. Technically, if you're very careful about how you remove it, you can remove it now. But you have to start in the middle and work backwards towards the edge, one square at a time. If, for whatever stupid reason, I were to go through here and say, oh, I'm just going to dig this whole stripe at once, what would happen is stupid Dwarf 1 would carve from over here, stupid Dwarf 2 would carve from over here, and the 3 tiles in the middle would cave in and kill people. Never, ever, ever, ever trust dwarves to do something in a particular order. Bad idea. Now already those two tiles on that center section on that bottom right, I could dig those out right now and be safe, because the flooring is connected orthogonally to the south, and the 3 tiles of the northern section of the strip are connected at the north end. Cave-ins! Everybody loves cave-ins. Except, miners and people underneath them, and me when I didn't mean to do it. At this point, our mine workers have nothing to do, and I don't really want to dig down any further just yet. So what we're going to do is, while the masonry jobs are temporarily disabled, we're going to commit them to the mining crew, or to the masonry crew, and they will move blocks just like the masons will. When speed is essential, go parallel. Yep, cave-ins is what we were covering. We're getting ready to make take advantage of an exploit in Dwarf Fortress where you can grow surface crops underground if you have exposed their plot to sun at some point. I'm actually building 4 floors, 25 squares across each. Now, it'll take a minute because they've got to run the blocks all the way in and out of the fortress here. It's a long trip. There's not really anything I can do about that for now. I don't. That's why I'm doing this in parallel. If I only have 2 masons doing it, it takes forever. Every person I can throw at it more just makes this process more quick. We also have to finish. We haven't yet finished our fisherman's shack over here on this side. We're not done yet. Okay, let's talk about how to do this exploit wrong before we get finished here. You'll notice... I got to do something else first before I can demonstrate. Got to actually have people produce some surface crops before I can actually start farming surface crops, don't I? Floor is... oh, you were asked about the floor for the fishing shack. What we're going to do here is once the fishing shack's outer walls are constructed and anchored effectively, we're going to go back and remove one section of floor and replace it with a grate. And then they'll fish through the grate.
We need to build a trade depot.
Alright, now hopefully our carpenter has nothing better to do with his time. He'll come along here momentarily. We'll get somebody to build that depot up. We won't get to be able to take advantage of the wagons, unfortunately. And we need to have a metalsmith, so temporarily I'm going to make our carpenter into a pretend metalsmith. We don't have any forges for him to actually use, so it's not going to harm anything. Alright, and now we have a depot. Now we're going to talk about a different sort of exploit. And this exploit is all about relief supplies. Relief supplies, you might be asking? What we're going to do is we're going to invite the caravan in. Come on, guys, bring your stuff in. Throw it in our depot. Load it up. We're going to trade. Only we're going to give you nothing, and you're going to give us everything. What we're effectively going to do is wait until the caravan arrives with its goods, and then we're going to disassemble it. Here come the merchants with their goods on their pack animals. Notice I can't get the wagons in here because they can't get across the traps. But the pack animals will deliver us some goods. Technically, no, it's not an exploit. There is a cost to doing this. It's not free stuff. Well, technically it is free stuff, but it's only free stuff now. It hurts us down the road. See, the way merchants in Dwarf Fortress works is very simple. When a merchant arrives, there is a value assigned to the caravan. The value of all of its people, all of the equipment, all of their clothing, everything they brought with them, the pack animals, the wagons, everything is totaled up. And let's say, for the sake of round numbers, it's 10,000 dwarf bucks. When they make their trades and they leave the map, the value of the caravan is assessed a second time. And the net profit or loss determines how much stuff they're going to bring next time. So, for example, 10,000 dwarf bucks in, they leave with 13,000 dwarf bucks. That's a 3,000 or 30% profit. They're probably going to bring up more stuff next time than they brought this time. If, however, they arrive in the depot and we disassemble it right out from under them and confiscate everything they have and bring it downstairs and use it for ourselves, they're leaving with a profit of almost nothing. In fact, it's a huge loss. Now, a loss from the Dwarven caravan, not even really a big deal. The Dwarves always come and trade. They never get pissed. They never declare war. But if you do this with the humans or the elves, or hypothetically, it has happened, with the goblins, you will provoke a war. If not the first time, then the second or third time for sure. Because you are forcing them to leave with such a negative loss that it's basically a total loss of their entire caravan. You are responsible for the fate of every caravan that enters your map. If the goblins ambush it halfway to your depot, slaughter everybody in the caravan, and kobolds run off with the stuff, you're still responsible. You are treated as having confiscated all of those goods. It doesn't matter whether you confiscated them or the kobolds swiped them. At the end of the day, the caravan came on, and then they left. Now, the question arises, well, how do you know who you're trading with so you know whether you can accidentally confiscate their goods or not? Well, there's two ways. First off, you can find out by querying the individuals. This merchant here, I could view him and, hey, look, he's a short, sturdy creature, fond of drink and industry. That's a dwarf. Elves and humans have a different description. However, if you don't know, or you don't care, or you just want to do it in a hurry, the easiest way is actually just look at the season. Dwarves always come in autumn. Goblins, if you're getting goblin traders, come in winter, and goblin traders are incredibly rare, for the record. It happens, theoretically, it can happen, but I haven't heard of anybody doing it in a long time. Dwarves come in the autumn, goblins come in the winter, elves come in the spring, humans come in the summer. So based on the season, I know who this is. Now, there's a little bit of fuzziness. This is late autumn, depending on the timing, how long it took the wagons to get there, how long it took them to get set up. It could theoretically be winter before the dwarves actually are ready to leave. So you can get traders in a season that they're not really arriving in. You can always look at your announcements page. Over here in the announcements, you'll see, let's go back a ways here, and there's going to have to be an autumn here somewhere. Right there is autumn arriving. Shortly thereafter, we got some migrants. That's there. And then a little further on, we got merchants, and we haven't changed season yet. So I know that this is autumn that they arrived in, for example. Humans are humans. Dalesmen, if there is such a thing, is got to be a mod, probably Masterwork or Genesis. This is pure vanilla aside from DF hack and utilities, so just humans. Actually, ideally, in an ideal world where you didn't have to worry about invaders and I didn't have to worry about giant monkeys dismembering my dwarves, I would have built this trade depot in a much more exposed area and let the wagons in, because the wagons are where all the real heavy goods are, where the bulk of their goods are, and then disassembled the thing with the wagons in play. Now, if you don't want to trade or you don't want to deal with it, you don't have to build a depot. It's not essential. I've got enough stuff on hand and enough materials in this site that I don't have to trade for anything. I can make enough food to keep 100,000 dwarves fed. I can build a tree farm to get all the wood I need. I've got iron on site, and believe me, the goblin's going to bring me some more. If I've got iron, and I've got flux, and I've got a way to make fuel, I've got every metal item I could conceivably want. If I've got magma and I've got sand, I've got an infinite supply of glass items. If I've got glass and wood and metal, I have everything I need to make a fortress. God knows you're not going to run out of stone anytime soon. So, we built our depot. The dwarves have brought in their goods. As soon as they announce that they are finished unloading, which is now, we can now mark this for disassembly, and people will come along and take all this stuff. That's the good news. The bad news is, as I said, first off, it costs us. The main cost you're going to run into is that the dwarves next time, in next autumn, will bring us less stuff. Now, frankly, I don't care. Like I said, trading is not essential. But the dwarves won't ever declare war, so I can confiscate all this stuff, get a bunch of free supplies, let's call them relief supplies. Silk, cloth, bags, sand, food, anvils, iron, weapons, armor. They've unloaded all that stuff. It's sitting in my depot. All I gotta do is take it. When the elves come, I can take the stuff that I got from the dwarves that I don't care about and hand it to the elves and take some of the elves' stuff in exchange. And effectively, they've given you a second shipment of embark goods, if you will. Okay, guys, give me just a minute here. It's 1 o'clock, and I gotta step AFK for just a minute. I'll be right back. Yeah, we're not going to run too much longer.